and then and Saurabh can take over.
Yeah,
in
sure.
terms of iFast, we're a Singapore fintech firm. We're a listed entity in Singapore and present across 5 countries. In India, what we do is we offer platforms to corporate RIAs as well as MFDs, and what we try and do is get the best possible products on our platform. So the point being that it becomes easier for investors as well as advisors to focus on the right strategies, the right products, and nothing better than looking at Marcellus as a strategy and looking at Saurabh. Just a brief about Saurabh. I know he needs no introduction, but a complete stalwart in our industry, and I think he's a person all of us look up to in every aspect. Not only in terms of what he brings to the table, but his amazing books that have made us grow in life. We all have learned the basics of stock picking because of Saurabh, and he's been a very successful fund manager at Marcellus. The way they've grown the last 3 years is absolutely tremendous. In terms of other credentials, Saurabh was also with Ambit, where he's done amazing stuff. The coffee can portfolio was his baby, and we all have known about what he does on that side of it. So in terms of his qualification, he's been from London School of Economics. Yeah, I mean, there's not much I can say because Saurabh himself being there, and he'll take it ahead from here. And I would just request all of you all to refrain from asking any stock specific questions to Saurabh, and just try to keep it to his strategy and in terms of the market. And Saurabh, over to you, and yeah, and all the best for the session.
So thanks Parthiv, thank you Rajat, thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do, and then I'll try to wrap up by say around the 35-minute mark, so that we get a good 25 minutes for questions. So there's 3 of us who've been working together. When we started Marcellus, there was 3 of us. Now the company is now 110 people, but this is the sort of the group that's built the business. I'm sorry, here we go. And we started working together 19 years ago, so I had lots more hair on my head then, and so did my colleagues for that matter. I started a company in London called Clear Capital, and we used to do for British families what we are doing now for Indian families such as yourselves. Our specialism in those days, in 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, was London listed small caps. We became quite famous doing that. In January 2007, we did a little bit of maths and we figured out that the British financial system is going to blow up. So the entirety of 07, right? The entirety of 07 was spent sitting down with our 250 clients at that point and helping them understand which banks in the UK are going to blow up, why will they blow up, right? Detailed analysis on the balance sheets of large British banks. Then in early 2008, Jan 08, we figured out that not just the UK, but even the United States is going to blow up. And that's when we decided to sell my first company, Clear Capital. We were so fortunate. I can't tell you, I probably wouldn't be sitting in front of you had we not been fortunate. We pressed the button March 2008. One of the largest banks in Europe agreed to buy us. 10th May 2008, we got paid for selling the business. That evening, we migrated to Mumbai. Right, that was 14 years ago. The 3 of us landed in Mumbai. I had never lived in India until that point, so it was a completely new city. We were strangers in this city. You can make out from the surnames. One of us is a Punjabi, one of us is a Kannadiga, and one of us is a Bengali. Right, so that was 14 years ago. When we landed in Mumbai 14 years ago, because we didn't know anybody. Other than reading annual reports, there wasn't much else to do really, because we simply had no idea about the country. But as we read the annual reports of prominent Indian companies, it became clear to us that the Indian stock market at many levels is actually a sham. It's a racket, right? And I'll explain it to you in the simplest terms possible. I suspect many of you are running businesses. Some of you might even be running large companies, right? You're successful people. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on this call. If I asked any of you, how well is your company doing? How well is your business doing? Your reflex will think about cash flows. You'll reflexively think about cash flows. That's how any business person thinks. If I ask Rajat, how well is your business doing, Rajat will not think about top line or PAT. He will think cash ban raha hai nahi mere dhande mein. Now, if you look at India's 50 largest businesses, or the Nifty 50, you'll see the vast majority of these businesses, the vast majority of the Nifty 50 generates not a single rupee of free cash flow, right? The vast majority of India's large companies generate not a single rupee of free cash flow, राइट? लास्ट 1 साल की बात कर रहा हूँ, लास्ट 5 साल की बात कर रहा हूँ, लास्ट 15 साल की बात कर रहा हूँ, फूटी कौड़ी नहीं बनती इन बिजनेसेस से, राइट? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not illegal to run a business which doesn't generate cash flow, right? It's not illegal to run a business which doesn't generate cash flow. But what perplexed us back in 08, and now obviously we understand what happens is, what perplexed us was these promoters live personal lives where they own football teams and cricket teams and water polo teams and 6 flats in Burj Khalifa, and they're living it up in Bollywood. But धंधे में मालिक से एक फूटी कौड़ी नहीं बनती, राइट? बट हीरो इज ऑल ओवर द इंडियन लैंडस्केप, महाराजा समान विराजमान है हमारे देश में. बट एनुअल रिपोर्ट देखिए, आप उनकी फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट्स देखिए, no cash flow in the business. I'm so sorry, right? So what we did for the first 2 years in India is we went and met the biggest crooks in the country. So every week we would identify a naughty promoter. We would read his annual report. We had trained forensic analysts. We would read his annual report, identify पेज 32 में क्या कर रहे हैं, पेज 65 में कैसे पैसे निकाल रहे हैं, पेज 108 में कैसे पैसे निकाल रहे हैं, and then we would fly to the relevant city, right? Sit in front of the promoter and say, देखिए मालिक आप ही की annual report है, and we would show him how evident the theft was. And our question to these people, I mean, today many of them are in jail. Some are in Dhar jail, some are in Arthur Road jail, some are in Singapore, some are in London, some are in Dubai. But back then, 2009 and 10, these people were incredibly powerful. So our question to them was, sir, it's your company. You own 70% of it. तो आप अपने आप से क्यों चोरी कर रहे हो? Right? And their point to us was, सौरभ नए आए हो हिंदुस्तान में, that's why you think हम 3 जगह पे चोरी कर रहे हैं. Actually हम 6 जगह पे चोरी कर रहे हैं. भारत सरकार से चोरी कर रहे हैं, बैंक्स से चोरी कर रहे हैं, म्यूचुअल फंड से चोरी कर रहे हैं, रजत के क्लाइंट से चोरी कर रहे हैं, सौरभ के क्लाइंट से चोरी कर रहे हैं, विदेशी निवेशक से चोरी कर रहे हैं. And with the help of these titans of Indian theft, back in 2009 and 10, we figured out how to detect chores in India. So over those first 2 years of intense dialogue with people who are today in jail, over those first 2 years of intense dialogue with people who are now on the wrong side of the law, we figured out that there are fundamentally 12 ratios that will help you and me spot fraud. So this is very similar to a health checkup, right? In your health checkup, you get your triglycerides tested, your blood pressure checked, your white blood cells looked at, and in your health report, the doctor says ये है reference range, and अगर सौरभ का रीडिंग रेफरेंस रेंज के ऊपर आया, डॉक्टर बोल्ड में लिख देता है, फिर आपको डॉक्टर रिपोर्ट देते टाइम बोलता है जीपी से मिलो, राइट? दैट्स हाउ इट ब्रॉडली वर्क्स. वी आर बेसिकली, our first job, step 1 for Marcellus is to do a health checkup, a forensic checkup on the 500 largest companies in the stock market. How does it work? I'll give you a very simple example. A simple forensic metric which is proved to be very for us is metric number 6, which is growth in auditors comp, growth in auditors fees divided by growth in revenues. So if you find any company, the auditors fees are consistently growing faster than revenues, that's a simple indication that the auditor is being bribed to forge the annual report. And this happens in several prominent companies in our country. This is how in the year 2010, we locked into Crompton Greaves and we figured out there is something very naughty happening in Crompton Greaves. At that time, Crompton Greaves was a blue chip stock held by all the large funds, but the forensics on Crompton Greaves gave the game away. Right? Similarly, an equally powerful forensic metric is this pehla wala metric. It's called the cash conversion ratio. हर 100 रुपए operating profit में, for every $100 of operating profit, how much cash flow does the company generate, right? So if you or I know the working capital cycle of the sector, we will be able to figure out what should be the cash conversion ratio. So for example, in a well-run pharma company, the cash conversion ratio should be around 80-85%. 100 रुपए profit में 85 रुपए cash flow बन जानी चाहिए. But if you look at, say, South India's largest pharma company, cash conversion 80-85 नहीं है, cash conversion 60 है, right? 20 rupees cash goes missing for every 100 rupees of operating profit. कहाँ जाता है वो पैसा, right? So the first 2 years, we did the forensics. In 2009, we hired a gentleman called Ashwin Shetty from KPMG. Ashwin today is our small cap fund manager. Ashwin showed us how this Hyderabadi promoter steals money. If any of you are interested, I can discuss that as the conversation proceeds. The book in which the blockbuster bestseller in which we have laid all of this out, real promoters, real chori described. The book is called Diamonds in the Dust. It's easily available in Amazon. It's unfortunately or fortunately brutally pirated and available in every footpath in the country in pirated form as well. But leaving aside Diamonds in the Dust, I'll give you the book references at the end. Our first job is to use these ratios to identify naughty promoters. Roughly half the stock market we scratch out using forensic science, right? Using forensic ratios, using our 15 strong forensic analyst team, half the stock market, much of the Nifty 50 gone, right? Cricket team, football team, volleyball team, water polo team gone, right? Pehla kaam. That leaves us with roughly 100 clean companies, roughly 100 companies where the books are believable, where we know that if we were to buy shares in those 100 companies, Rajat ka paisa chori nahi hoga. Right? Step one of the research process is to establish a white list of 100 odd companies, right? Then through 2013, 14, 15, 16, we met these 100 companies again and again, bar mile. Right? As we met them, as we became familiar with the promoters of these 100 relatively clean companies, we realized that whilst all of them are clean, most of them are incompetent. Right? What does that mean? That means that the promoters of these companies, whilst they are good people, these promoters are not able to generate a return on capital above the cost of capital. Right? What is the promoter's job? What is my job as the promoter of Marcellus? What is, say, Mukesh Ambani ji's job as the promoter of Reliance Industries Limited? A promoter's job in any context is to deliver a return on capital above the cost of capital. रिटर्न ऑन कैपिटल हमारे देश में अगर आप देखते हैं निफ्टी 50 का रिटर्न ऑन कैपिटल barely 11% है. The cost of capital for you, right? All of you on the call, your cost of capital is at least 15%. If you don't compound at 15%, your portfolio construction is going to let you down big time. So 15% आपको मेरे को कम से कम, we need a minimum 15% return on capital. Barely 40 companies in India generate a return on capital consistently above 15%, right? So 100 companies are clean, but the list of companies which are clean and have competence in the management layer is just about 40, right? So by 2016, these 40 companies were pretty clearly identified. And that's when as we looked carefully at those 40 companies, India revealed itself in a way to us, which has allowed us to create huge amounts of wealth for investors, right? So as Parthiv was very kind with his comments at the beginning of the meeting, a big part of our ability to create wealth has been because as we looked at those 40 companies clearly, it became clear to us that India is the world's most monopolized country. Today in India, no more than 20 companies generate 80% of the nation's profits, right? Pura country ka 80% profit sirf 20 company ke naam jata hai. How did this happen? Look at the chart on the left, right? In the early 90s, when the economy was opened up, in that era, barely 17%. In the early 90s, 17% of the country's profits went to the top 20 companies. So early 90s में top 20 were Hindustan Motors, Premier Automobiles, Century Textiles, Mafatlal, इस प्रकार के companies उस ज़माने बड़े थे. They accounted for barely 17% of the nation's profits. Around the time my colleagues and I came 10, 11 years ago, the top 20 companies accounted for 30% of the nation's profits. Just before COVID, 2019, the top 20 accounted for 60% of the nation's profits. And today, sort of at the end of COVID, the top 20 account for 80% of the country's profits, right? So these are companies like TCS, HDFC Bank, Kotak Bank, right? Gigantic companies now, $100 billion market cap in many cases, consistently growing profits at 20-25, right? COVID ho, malaria ho, Modi ho, Trump ho, Mulayam ho, Biden ho, koi bhi ho, that they don't care. Inka profit, inka munafa 20-25 se badhta hai. Inka profit share is rocketing up, right? However, elsewhere in India, story is very different. As per the government of India, there are 20,000 companies in this country with net worth above 10 crores, right? 20,000 companies with net worth above 10 crores. For these 20,000, if you subtract from these 20,000 the profits of the top 20, if you subtract for these 20,000 from these 20,000 the profits of the top 20, profit growth for the rest of this country is not 20%, it's not 10%. For the rest of the country, profit growth is just 1%. Right? So in simple Hindi in our office, the way we have helped our sales and client support team understand is the way India works is it's sabka saath, but it's top 20 ka vikas. Right? It's top 20 ka vikas. Bilkul, sabka saath bilkul hai, but top 20 ka vikas hai. Now, the rest of the next 10 minutes I'll spend helping you understand how did this happen? How did 20 companies clean up the nation's profits in front of you and me over the last 10, 15 years? Pehli cheez. Second thing we'll focus on is how can you profit from this paradigm? Aap paise kaise kamaoge is paradigm mein? We're not here to do social sudhar in this call. We are here to help you compound your wealth. Kaise karenge? Okay. So let me start with this table on the right. What you'll notice if you look at the Indian economy a little closely, what you'll see is pretty much any product or service which is essential for your life, my life, stuff that you and I depend on to live a decent life, you'll notice that either one company or at most two companies are taking home 80% of the profits from that product, right? In many cases, actually, they take home 90% of the profits from that product, right? Now, just to take a simple example, so wherever you are in the country, if you go to the supermarket near your house, so I live in the suburb of Bombay, there's a supermarket called D-Mart near my house. If I go to the D-Mart near my house, the entire luxury biscuit shelf is this company, right? We've all grown up with the products. The pura ka pura luxury biscuit market iske haath mein hai, right? And if I stay in the same supermarket, the D-Mart near my house, the entire economy biscuit shelf is this company, right? We've all had Monaco and Crack Jack and Parle G. If you add up Britannia plus Parle, that's 85% of the biscuit industry profits. And one company dominates, monopolizes premium. Dusra company dominates, monopolizes economy, right? The two companies don't really compete with each other. Now, why is that important? Because these two companies don't dominate, they're incredibly profitable, right? So Britannia ka return on capital is 45%, right? As a result, the promoters of Britannia, the Wadia family, are worth, I would say, comfortably $6 to $7 billion. Aram se, right? They're listed so you can see their wealth. They don't have any other business which generates cash flow, right? So cricket and Bombay dyeing and real estate and Bombay Burma, usse cash flow nahi banta. Airline go first se bhi paisa nahi banta. Just biscuits alone make the Wadias worth at least 7 billion. The Parle promoters are unlisted, but if you download the numbers from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, you can calculate that they'll be worth around 3 billion, right? So the two biscuit families together are worth $10 billion, right? Similarly in paints, if you look at the two companies that dominate paints and account for 90% of the industry's profits, the promoters of these paint companies are together worth $30 billion, right? And similarly in cigarettes and cooking oil and hair oil and bachcho ka doodh, in adhesives and waterproofing and glass line reactors and aliphatic amines, so on and so forth, right? It gets a little repetitive, so I'll not belabor the point. Roughly 25 monopolists pretty much earn the entire country's profits, right? So you'll be thinking, मैं हर रोज सुबह यूनिकॉर्न के बारे में पढ़ रहा हूँ, इतना कुछ चहल पहल हो रहा है, but you know, fundamentally 25 कंपनी पूरे देश का पैसा कमाते हैं, right? Now, why are you and I so interested in these 25 monopolists? The reason we are interested in, on average, the Indian monopolist's return on capital employed. On average, the Indian monopolist's return on capital employed. Return on capital employed is nothing but operating profit divided by धंधे में कितना पैसा लगाया है मालिक ने. On average, the ROCE of an Indian monopolist is 45%, right? No other country in the world can match India in this regard. So अगर आप दुनिया में कोई भी मशहूर कंपनी ले लो, Toyota, Walmart, Facebook, Google, Apple, Netflix, Microsoft, take any world-class company that you fancy. If that company earns a 20% ROCE, typically the CEO will become a legend. किताब लिखी जाएगी, right? That's how the global economy functions. In our country, our monopolist clients have taught me The monopolist clients have taught me ki sort of 20% ROC, we don't step out of the house. Our driver goes to run the business. The minimum ROC an Indian monopolist is willing to settle for is 30%. 45%, as I said, is the average that they end up with. Now, this number holds the key for you and me to compound at 10x in 10 years with the volatility of a Bharat Sarkar bond, right? This number, this 45% ROCE number, holds the key to your and my compounding at 25%, which is 10x in 10 years with the volatility of a Bharat Sarkar bond. So how does it work? For any company, whether it is the Murugappa Group in Chennai, Mukesh Ambani ji ki company, Little Marcellus, for any company, the amount of surplus that the company generates, right, the amount of free cash flow that the company generates is nothing but return on capital minus cost of capital, ROC minus cost of capital. Assume for simplicity, the cost of capital of the company is 15%, right? It's actually lower, but the maths is simple if you assume 15%. Return on capital, as I said, is 45. The free cash flow of a typical Indian monopolist, therefore, is around 30% of capital employed, right? Out of that 30% of capital employed, how is this surplus allocated, right? And this is where the first book that made us famous and in a way launched our business in India, right? This is where Unusual Billionaires was the blockbuster book. It still remains India's biggest business strategy bestseller. What we showed in this book, what we showed in Unusual Billionaires is that one third of the surplus, one third of 30%. One third of 30%, matlab 10% of capital employed, the dominant franchises, the monopolists, they dividend it out, right? The dividend pays for their lifestyle. Chori karne ki zarurat nahi hoti promoter ji ko, because the dividend is very generous and it pays for their lifestyle. 2/3 of 30%, the remaining amount is 2/3. 2/3 of 30%, promoter G reinvest that back in business, right? The dominant monopolist will reinvest 2/3 of 30%, which is 20%. Extra 20% capital har saal business mein lagaya jayega. New factories will be built, new products will be launched, new people will be hired, right? You look at the annual reports of any of these companies, Asian Paints ka dekhiye, Pidilite ka dekhiye, Dr. Lal's ka dekhiye, Divi's Lab ka dekhiye, Nestle ka dekhiye, you'll see every year capital employed goes up by 20%. Metronomic hai. New factories, new products, doesn't matter politics mein kya ho raha hai, economics mein kya ho raha hai, har saal business ko 20% se, business ki installed capacity ko 20% se grow karna hai. Now, provided the monopolist promoter, provided he has a modicum of common sense, thoda sa theek thak sa competent hai, the result of growing capital employed at 20% every year, is this slide, right? So the first thing you see with these companies is free cash flow to equity. What is free cash flow to equity? Free cash flow to equity is nothing but profits minus working capital minus capital expenditure. Right? Free cash flow to equity is the surplus left over after everybody has been paid off. Right? मैंने suppliers को पैसे बांट दिए, मैंने shareholders को dividend बांट दिया, मैंने factory का खर्चा पाई भर दिया, and after all that, what I'm left with is free cash flow to equity. This is how investors like us assess businesses. Profits से हम assess नहीं करते. Profits actually don't matter that much. What matters is धंधे की free cash flow कितनी है. So what you see with these dominant franchises is capital employed 20% से बढ़ता है. फ्री कैश फ्लो बढ़ता है 25% से. लास्ट 20 साल में, लास्ट 10 साल में, उसके पहले के 10 साल में, लेटेस्ट 5 साल में, उसके पहले के 5 साल में, उसके पहले के 5 साल में. These businesses are very steady. 25%, 25% is the compounding in free cash flow, which is 10x in 10 years, right? And the reason this matters is because free cash flow compounds at 25%, your wealth, my wealth, promoter G's wealth compounds at 25%. लास्ट 20 साल, लास्ट 10 साल, उसके पहले के 10 साल, लेटेस्ट 5 साल, उसके पहले के 5 years, उसके पहले के 5 years, उसके पहले के 5 years. Right? You get my point? It's a very steady process. Free cash flows and share price compounds at 25%, which is 10x in 10 years. So summarize, step one, we are looking for promoters who are not stealing money. Why are we doing that? Because if the promoter steals money, you will not make money. I will not make money. He will be making out in Dubai with your and my stolen money. Step 2, not just clean, we need the promoter to have business acumen. Akal honi chahiye usme, so that he runs a business where return on capital is above cost of capital on a consistent basis. This is very rare in India. Step 3, it's not enough just to be clean and competent. We need the promoter to be a monopolist. What is a monopolist? A monopolist is not a company with large market share. A monopolist is a company where even if the closest competitor cuts prices by 30%, our investee company should not need to cut price even by 1 rupee. Right? I stress this. Like, a lot of people misunderstand. A lot of people say, देखो जियो का market share, देखो इंडिगो का market share, देखो टाटा स्टील का market share, देखो market share से घंटा होता है. Right? What you and I are looking for is companies where even if the closest competitor is 30% cheaper, my investee company should not need to cut price even by 1 rupee. तो ऐसे कंपनी कहाँ पे है? आपके सामने है. Right? So take an example and deliberately choose a company everybody is familiar with. Let's choose Titan. Right? So if you ever go to Titan, you'll see that Titan's making charges are consistently 20 to 40% higher than any other jeweler, right? Not just the local jeweler ke comparison mein, even compared to a Joy Alucas or a Malabar, Titan's making charges are 20 to 40% higher. Yet Titan is by far now the country's largest jeweler. It's grown 200-fold. 32% compounding means basically more than 200-fold over the last 20 years. No other jeweler has been remotely been able to match Titan for success. And yet, throughout this entire period, Titan has been 20 to 40% more expensive than the competition. Why is no other jeweler able to compete with Titan? Right? What prevents other jewelers from even remotely hoping to compete with Titan? Why are Gujarati jewelers in Mumbai, Marwadi jewelers in Kolkata, Punjabi jewelers in Delhi packing up? Why are they saying, "Maaf karo, Titan se hum compete nahi kar sakte"? There are 4 things which underpin Titan's utter dominance, right? And this is really our job. This is where the most time-consumptive part of the job kicks in. To be honest, because the forensic piece is now so well drilled for us, the forensics don't need so much time. The capital allocation bit is a relatively straightforward process of studying the last 10 years numbers and making sure the promoter has got a decent brain on his head. The hardest part is this monopoly part, because the company offers no help. No company will help an investor understand why they have built a monopoly, why the competition is utterly powerless, right? So this is what we found out around 3 years or so ago when we really dug into Titan. The first aspect, and I'll start with the most easy aspect of Titan, then I'll build up the complexity. So the most obvious aspect of Titan is their cost of capital. So remember, in jewelry, first the jeweler has to buy the gold, get the karigari done. Then it comes to the shop near your house. Then it sits there, waits for you to go and buy it, right? All of this takes up working capital. Paisa lagta hai to buy the gold, karigari, stock up karne mein, whilst they're waiting for you to come and buy the jewelry. So to finance this, for Titan's Tanishq franchisees, to finance this effort, Titan borrows in the wholesale money market in Mumbai. They borrow at a staggeringly low cost of 4%, right? Because of the Tata Sons reputation, they borrow at the incredibly low cost of 4%. The local jeweler will at the minimum pay 9%, right? There's no hope in hell of even a chain like a Malabar or a Tribhuvan Das Zaveri competing with Titan on cost of working capital. That's the first disadvantage. Second advantage, if you look at Titan's annual report, not just today, even 20 years ago, India's brightest talents, right? IIT, IIM talents run Titan. This has been the case now for the best part of a generation. India's brightest talents run Titan. The local jeweler, on the other hand, will be lucky if a BCom pass comes in, joins him or her, right? It's really difficult for jewelers to be able to afford any half decent talent, let alone IIT talent. Thirdly, every year as the wedding season approaches, Titan will launch 2 to 3 new collections, right? There'll be Marathi wedding collection, Marwadi wedding collection, Punjabi wedding collection, Gujarati wedding collection, whichever part of India you're in, that specific regional taste is catered for. Typically, it'll be leading actresses who will front these collections. A Titan showroom, I'm sure you've seen, will be in a prestigious location. It'll look beautiful. The reputation for quality is very high. They pioneered something called the caratometer, which is the final word in quality in our country. And therefore, any affluent woman buying diamond-studded jewelry will aspire to go to Tanishq. She's not going to go to a hole in the wall in Karol Bagh or Sarjapur or T Nagar or Ghatkopar in Bombay. She will want to go to a Titan in South Extension in a glamorous locale with a massive collection, right? The local jeweler has no hope in hell. They neither have the brand nor the design chops nor the financial strength to launch so many collections and offer such a rich variety. So that's the third disadvantage. The fourth thing, and this is the most recent monopolistic strength that they have built, and that's a distinctive feature of Indian monopolies. Every 2 to 3 years, they will up the ante, they will add another layer of monopoly muscle. So 3 saal pehle, just before COVID hit the country, Titan spent around 300 crores, which by their standards is very little, very small sum of money. They spent 300 crores acquiring a company called Carrot Lane, right? Now, you might have seen Carrot Lane in your house. I would strongly recommend pay them a visit. It's very interesting to see how Titan has added a completely disruptive model, which I reckon will destroy the rest of the jewelry industry. So courtesy my 12-year-old daughter, we went a year or so ago to buy a gift for my wife. We went to buy a ring for my wife. So my daughter dragged me there. I wasn't very impressed when I entered, right? The Carrot Lane shops you'll see are very small. There'll be maximum 600 square feet. And there are not that many SKUs there. Kariban 50, 70 SKUs there. So I got a little irritated. I looked around, kuch to tha nahi. Then I spotted that there were 7 shop assistants. Each of them had iPads in their hand. So one of them came to me and said, "Sir, how can I help?" And my daughter said, "We're looking for a ring for my mom." So the assistant immediately whipped out her iPad and she started showing us hundreds of rings on her iPad, right? And I realized that the iPad has many thousands of designs, and it became evident that the shop is basically there as a staging ground for the shop assistants to show me the thousands of designs on the iPad. So my daughter ultimately chose a ring for her mom, and the lady then said to us that, "Look, now that you've ordered it, we will get it made." So I said, "What do you mean? Do you not have it made?" She said, "No, the way it works is we have got 300 outsourced jewelers. They are suppliers to us. Once a customer chooses, only then is the product made." And I immediately realized that this completely beats the Purana model. The Purana model was make it and pray that the customer will come. Here I choose and then they make. So I said, "Theek hai, so we will be buying this piece of jewelry." So she said, "How will you pay, cash or by card?" I said, "What do you mean? You said you'll get it made. So when you get it made, then I will pay you." She said, "No, it doesn't work like that. You will pay us first and then we will get it made." And that immediately told me that there's a second layer of the new model. I pay them. I finance their working capital. The customer finances the Carrot Lane working capital. This has never happened before in India on this scale, right? So the entire working capital cycle is turned on its head. Rather than the company burning cash to create inventory for Saurabh to buy, Saurabh now finances the Titan jewelry making machine. So I took out my card. Then came the third punch. So she said, "If you download our app, you get 15% off." So I agreed, and my daughter downloaded it. Within 3 minutes, the email came that we got the discount. And then I realized what happens, right? Because as soon as you and I download the app, we're basically opening up our phone to in this case Carrot Lane, but this typically happens with everything else. If you download an app of a wallet or a financial services institutions, आपका geographic location monitored है, आपके SMSs read हो जाते हैं, your notifications are checked out. So they basically in the next few months they find out everything they need to find out about you. What's your birthday? How much do you earn? What do you spend on? When's your wedding anniversary? And obviously that allows them to blast you with cross-selling through email, through text message, through phone calls. They cross-sell away. And because it's a credible brand and they've got a huge collection, the cross-selling is actually very high quality. So the customer acquisition cost is completely slowed. So in 3 different ways, the Carrot Lane business model, and because it's listed, you can see their financial statements, it has simply no equal in the jewelry industry. Sales per square feet are through the roof. The working capital cycle is actually negative, i.e. in their favor, and the customer acquisition cost is now pushed down to a ridiculously low level. The local jeweler doesn't stand a chance. This company is already India's largest jeweler. As I said, 200 guna growth kiya hai last 20 saal mein. We are the world's largest market for jewelry. Titan's market share is 7%. So you never have to see me ever again. You can go and buy our books, and I wish you the very best of luck in compounding in the years to come. So we've got a few minutes for questions. Happy to take any questions if anybody has it.
Thanks, Saurabh. And I believe this is the best way we can see about the choosing a multi-bagger portfolio. And why we chose this topic was that everybody wants to look at multi-bagging portfolio without taking the effort to make sure that it is like a test series match. It's a long term. You can't have a multi-bagger portfolio in a 1 year's duration. So that was the reason why to put that topic in a correct perspective. Like everybody thinks that, okay, gee, man, passive investing, I will take a Nifty 50 ETF and all, and I will make money out of it. Because then obviously, again, only the 25% of the companies actually make them much of the business out of it. Now, when we talk about the PMS per se, Marcellus PMS per se, and we had collected a couple of queries on behalf of our clients. Like we have seen people losing money on very good stocks. So technically, when we talk about, like, if I would say, for example, there has been a Maruti, a person buying a Maruti at 9,500 and then seeing it's not coming up to the term in terms of asset allocation, in terms of allocation and all, much more accrue this to the investor bias. Now, let me ask you something. These are all customer insights that I'm sharing with you, and I would like you to enlighten the participants here. Say, for example, a person has opted, an HNI investor has opted for a PMS portfolio. Now, when he takes a portfolio, now there will be two people who have invested at different point in time. So there would be a person who would have invested in last 3 months and a person who would have entered around 8 months back or 9 months back. So obviously the person who has invested many times what happens, the investor every morning wakes up and checks his portfolio on the mobile. And now there are around 16 types of investor biases. Now, as you as a CIO and the fund manager, I would like you to put some light. What has to be the approach while looking at the portfolio once that portfolio is set up? And on PMS, obviously, the minimum investment is 50 lakhs because then he will start comparing 50 lakhs with an FD returns. You're getting it? So I would like your perspective on it.
Okay. So look, I mean, so first let's do a little bit of basic maths, right? And then, it's your money. So I completely understand why you might be looking at it every morning. But let me first explain the maths, and then it's up to you how you want to do your investing. So starting with the basic point, the share price of any company is equal to the PE multiple of the company multiplied by earnings, right? So basic high school maths, right? I think class 5 में सिखाया था, यहाँ पे E और E कट जाता है, left hand side equal to right hand side, right? So the share price of any company is the PE multiplied by earnings. ठीक है, इसका मतलब क्या हुआ? If you differentiate this, the change in share price is the change in the PE multiple plus the change in earnings. Earnings मतलब profit. ठीक है, so for in any company that any of you have invested in, आप दो ही तरीके से पैसे बना सकते हो. Either the PE multiple goes up, or the earnings go up, or if you're lucky, both go up, right? Balle balle. Now, using this basics framework, right? I'll divide the Indian market for you in. In 3 different parts, right? Pehla part, 90% of our Indian market, right? 90% of the Indian market, I call it A's for airlines. Why do I call it A's for airlines? हमारे देश के इतिहास में जितने भी एयरलाइंस है, सारे के सारे एयरलाइंस कभी भी बेचारों का प्रॉफिट नहीं ग्रो करता, राइट? वो आसमान में गोल गोल प्लेन घुमाते रहते हैं. द नंबर ऑफ पैसेंजर्स फ्लाइंग इन इंडिया टिपिकली ग्रोज 15% प्रति वर्ष, लेकिन बेचारे पैसे नहीं बना पाते. क्यों नहीं बना पाते? बिकॉज दीज कंपनीज, एज फॉर एयरलाइंस, टेलीकॉम्स, ये सारे कंपनी, मेटल्स, माइनिंग, पावर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, इन सारे कंपनीज का रिटर्न ऑन कैपिटल इज बिलो देयर कॉस्ट ऑफ कैपिटल. इनकी रिटर्न ऑन कैपिटल 5 से 11-12 के बीच में रहती है. कॉस्ट ऑफ कैपिटल 15 है, ये रिटर्न ऑन कैपिटल कभी 15 तक पहुंचा ही नहीं पाते. इनकी फूटी कौड़ी बन नहीं पाती, राइट? एंड व्हाई इज द रिटर्न ऑन कैपिटल लो? बिकॉज कोई बैरियर्स टू एंट्री नहीं है, कहीं कुछ खास बात नहीं है, right? I don't think you wake up in the morning. You might wake up in the morning, check your portfolio, but I certainly don't think you wake up in the morning and say, आज तो मेरे को मूड आ रहा है कि मैं स्पाइस जेट की फ्लाइट में चढ़ जाऊं, या आज मेरे को मूड आ रहा है कि मैं इंडिगो पे चढ़ जाऊं. I don't think anybody does that, right? And I can't remember anybody having done that in the past. If you wanted to set up an airline, हमारे देश में काफी आसान है. आप चॉकलेट्स लेके राइट मिनिस्ट्री में पहुंच जाइए, आपकी एयरलाइन शुरू हो जाएगी. कोई बैरियर्स टू एंट्री नहीं है, पैसा नहीं बन पाता. Now, in such circumstances, how can you make money? right? How can you make money? You have to pray भगवान जी इस एयरलाइन की P multiple बढ़ा दीजिए. And if you are on the right side of God, भगवान का हाथ आपके सर के ऊपर है. If the airline's P multiple doubles in 10 years, if the airline's P multiple doubles in 10 years, तो आप प्रति वर्ष, that means anything which doubles in 10 years is going up 7% a year. तो आपका टोटल रिटर्न बन पड़ेगा 7 + 0 which is 7%. आप मिस्टर धार को बोलोगे मजा ही नहीं आया यार, तो फिक्स डिपॉजिट जैसी रिटर्न आ गई, राइट? दिस इज द हालत ऑफ 90% ऑफ पीपल हु इन्वेस्ट इन म्यूचुअल फंड्स, उनकी ये दशा होती है. 7% से कंपाउंड करते हैं. एयरलाइंस, टेलीकॉम्स, पावर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, मेटल्स, माइनिंग, जिंदगी गुजर जाती है, धंधा ग्रो नहीं करता. नाउ वन लेयर बेटर देन दिस, वन नॉच बेटर is good companies called Warren Buffett type companies. इनको मैं Warren Buffett type company बोलता हूँ. They account for around 9% of our market, right? Warren Buffett type companies अच्छे companies होते हैं, जैसे कि मारुति, अभी धार साहब ने बोला, यूनिलीवर, बजाज ऑटो, हीरो मोटो, right? So let's take Maruti since he mentioned it. Maruti is a decent firm. They have comparative advantages. उनकी sales and service network is clearly a comparative advantage. They have Japanese technology. They have built a really credible brand. So Maruti आप देखोगे 10 में से 6 साल in a typical 10-year का economic cycle, 6 साल out of 10, Maruti's return on capital will be around 25-27%, well above the cost of capital. That means their surplus will be, remember the surplus is return on capital minus cost of capital. So Maruti's surplus बन पड़ेगी करीबन 12%. Maruti will reinvest that surplus in new factories and new cars, new models, and over a 10-year period, Maruti की profit grow करती है 12% से, या बजाज ऑटो, हीरो मोटो, very similar. All these companies 12% से profit grow करती है. Now, मानिए भगवान का हाथ आपके ऊपर है. You buy Maruti at the bottom of the PE cycle, right? You buy Maruti at the bottom of the PE cycle. You sell it at the top. PE multiple आपके ऊपर double हो जाती है. If you double the market Maruti PE multiple, that's 7%, 7% added there, 12 + 7, 19, and you've done a very good job, right? But अगर भगवान का हाथ आपके ऊपर नहीं है, जैसे मेरे ऊपर किसी का हाथ unfortunately मेरे ऊपर नहीं है, so I buy Maruti completely at the wrong time. Rather than 12 + 7, मेरे को 12 - 7, 5% मिलेगा. फिर से वो FD वाली हालत. तो मैं मारुति लेता हूँ, तो मेरे को तो आती नहीं मार्केट टाइमिंग, भगवान का हाथ मेरे ऊपर नहीं है, तो मेरे को फिर से FD वाली रिटर्न मिल जाएगी. So what do I do? मेरे ऊपर कोई भगवान का हाथ नहीं है, मेरे को आता पता नहीं है PE मल्टीपल क्या हो रहा है, कहाँ पे मार्केट जा रही है. We genuinely, I'm not making it up. We have no knowledge in Marcellus about इन सब चीजों के बारे में. So we just focus on this 1%, just 1% of the Indian market, which is the C's for CCP. ये अनोखा सेक्टर है, दुनिया के किसी और देश में नहीं मिलता, राइट? आपको दुनिया में कोई और देश में टाइटन जैसा ज्वेलर नहीं मिलेगा जो 50% ROC कमाता है, या एशियन पेंट जैसी पेंट कंपनी जो 40% ROC कमाती है, या HDFC बैंक जैसी बैंक जो 20% ROE कमाती है, या पीडिलाइट जैसा कंपनी जो 40% ROC बनाता है. आई टोल्ड यू नो, इंडिया के बाहर दुनिया भर में वर्ल्ड क्लास कंपनीज अर्न 20% ROC. India is unique in that we have these very high ROC monopolists. Now, what is special about these companies? Why are we interested in these high ROC companies? Because they compound at 25%. इनका business, इनका cash flow 25 पे compound करता है. Now, if you invest, you might have hand of God on your head. With hand of God, you are able to double the PE multiple, and then you get an outstanding outcome. 32%, मतलब 10 साल में 10 गुना नहीं, 10 साल में करीबन आप 10 साल में 20 गुना कमा लोगे, 18 गुना कमा लोगे, राइट? 20, 30, 25, आपने PE मल्टीपल डबल कर दी, भगवान का हाथ आपके ऊपर था. मैंने निवेश किया, बिकॉज मेरे ऊपर किसी का हाथ नहीं है, PE मल्टीपल halved on me, and I still got 18%. And that's what I love about this, right? I screw up with the timing because मेरे को timing का पता ही नहीं है. I screw up with the timing, I get 18%. I get the same, if even with messing up the timing, I make the same return, 18%, that Warren Buffett would make on Maruti, 19%, right? That's very good for me. Obviously, right, as you can figure out from my saying, nobody that I have met in my 20 years of investing has the foggiest idea about PE multiple. किसी को अता पता नहीं होता. What will your compounding therefore be driven by? Your compounding will be driven by this number, right? अगर आप standard investing करते हो metals, mining, airlines, telcos वगैरह में, आपका portfolio compound नहीं करेगा ढंग से. अगर आप मिड ये मारुति टाइप इन्वेस्टिंग करते हो, आपका करीबन 12% से होगा, राइट। और अगर आप हमारे साथ करते हो, और हमारा डोंट हैव टू डू इट विद मी, जस्ट बाय द बुक एंड डू इट योरसेल्फ, आपको 25 मिलेगा। नाउ I suspect what you are doing, right? I don't know you guys personally, but if you are like the rest of the people I've met, आपकी जिंदगी की 99% वेल्थ ये लो कंपाउंडिंग कैटेगरी में है, राइट। अभी आपको बहुत मजा आ रहा है क्योंकि मार्केट भागा है, बट आपकी 99% वेल्थ इस लो कंपाउंडिंग कैटेगरी में है। आपके पास बिल्कुल टाइटन है, आई एम श्योर आपके पास टाइटन है, आई एम श्योर आपके पास एशियन पेंट्स है, आपके पास HDFC बैंक है, बट आपका बहुत थोड़ा सा वेल्थ, सिर्फ 1% वेल्थ इस हाई कंपाउंडिंग कैटेगरी में है। आपने अपनी ज्यादातर पूंजी लगा दी है लो कंपाउंडिंग कैटेगरी में। वहां पे जब आपके साथ आपके ऊपर भगवान का हाथ होगा, जैसे मार्केट चली है 2 साल में, आप खुश होगे, राइट, आप ऐसे होगे, बट बाय एंड लार्ज यू विल हैव अ मॉडेस्ट एक्सपीरियंस. You will be compounding on average, I suspect, at 10-11% over long periods of time. Our job through our books is to convince you to put your money to work. You can do it yourself. Our job is to make you help invest 100% of your wealth in this 25% category so that आपको 10 साल में 10 गुना मिले. It will change your life, but it will take you a little bit of time to understand what I'm saying, which is why I've written the book, so that at your leisure आप किताब खरीद के आराम से समझ सको इतना पैसा क्यों बनता है इस स्टाइल ऑफ इन्वेस्टिंग से. सो लेट मी जस्ट गिव यू द बुक रेफरेंसेस बिकॉज टाइम इज सेंस. सो आप ये किताबें Amazon पे खरीद सकते हो. 300 रुपए के हैं, पायरेटेड भी कुछ 200-250 मिलता है. दिल्ली मुंबई के ट्रैफिक लाइट्स में किताब छोटे छोटे बच्चे बेचारे जो आते हैं वो पायरेटेड बेचते हैं. फुटपाथ पे भी पायरेटेड बिकती है. अगर आपको इफ यू वांट टू अंडरस्टैंड हाउ टू किल योर कंपटीशन, यू आर रनिंग अ बिजनेस, आपको अपने कंपटीशन को बर्बाद करना है, तो ये वाली किताब पढ़िए. ये बिजनेस स्ट्रेटजी की किताब है. इंडिया के मोनोपोलिस्ट कैसे अपने कंपटीशन को निचोड़ के खत्म कर देते हैं. अगर आपको पैसा बनाना है, इफ यू वांट टू बी अ निवेशक, राइट, एंड यू वांट टू बी अ निवेशक योरसेल्फ, फिर आप ये वाली पढ़िए. इसका पहला हाफ आपको सिखाएगा रियल प्रमोटर्स, रियल नाम उनके हैं, उनके चोरी के तरकीब सिखाए गए हैं, एंड हाउ यू कैन कैच देम. फर्स्ट हाफ ऑफ डायमंड्स एंड रस्ट इज चोरी. Second half is how you can identify great companies. Both books are also available free of charge on Audible, or you can buy it on Kindle for I think 100 or 150 rupees, right? So, and if you don't want to buy it, just let us know via the good offices of Mr. Dhar. We will send you an autographed copy.
Sure. So, and and for our HNI investors and all, over the last 6 months, what we have done, we have ensured that when we come into wealth management, and that too for high net worth individuals, one thing is quite prerogative, because after a certain level of their investments and savings, they need people. Say, for example, if it's a high net worth individual who is already into a board of directors of certain companies or a Fortune 500 companies, then obviously they also do deserve a fund manager, a CIO, or a portfolio manager managing their investments. So at Finogent Advisory, what we do, if you want to invest overseas and have global portfolio, then we do have IFA's Financial Singapore portfolio. But if you really want to have your stock portfolio managed professionally, then we have Mr. Saurabh Mukherjea through Marcellus PMS managing a portfolio, if your investment style matches with consistent compounding portfolio as he has told. And not only that, if you have mutual funds, then there are other PMSs managing mutual funds. The essence is when we are working on the portfolio for HNIs and ultra HNIs, it is a totally different ball game. You can't have a diversified mutual fund portfolio which gives you average returns over a 10 period time when you have specialist managers with certain such detailed analysis and the backdrop of it. And in one of our videos, we have told that the type of disclosures that you have in a PMS are unheard of when you talk about mutual funds. A manager will not be explaining to you why he sold certain stocks or bought certain stocks and what was the loss in those or a profit in those mutual fund transactions that had happened. But in PMS, the disclosures, the transparency is way beyond. So what has been the charges, what has been the drill down? So that actually adds on to what you actually get out of it. So apart from some couple of the questions I have written here, if anyone would like to have any queries, he may directly interact with Saurabh right now, and you can maybe.
Rajat ji, एक और मैं point add कर दूंगा. I sit on the SEBI committee which regulates the mutual fund industry. So one of the consistent challenges I see is if those of you are listening, if you have a I think you put it a diversified mutual fund portfolio, right? मैं आपको इत्मीनान से बोल सकता हूँ, आपका 30% कम से कम 30% पैसा जा रहा है to promoters who do naughty things with your money. So I don't know about you. I don't want a promoter to do naughty things with my money, right? मैं मेहनत करता हूँ पैसे कमाने के लिए, and I won't give it to promoters who will steal my money. If you have built a diversified mutual fund portfolio and you are listening to me, then that's what you're doing. You're working hard and you're giving your money to people who do naughty things with your money.
Great. And one more thing, like many of HNI investors who get actually bombarded with so many of AIFs, alternative investment funds, and PMSs. So, and also there is not much generic information in the market. So just as a do it yourself, say if some PMSs options or the mailers come, what should be the broader view, or how the line of thinking of an investor should be to select which one is good for him? Say, for example, he doesn't have an advisor, he's not in conversation with, how can he decide himself?
So look, across the world, whenever you choose a fund, whenever I choose a fund, right? Because I lived in the UK for 18 years, मेरा pension अभी भी जो वहाँ पे जो pension है, for that I have a couple of fund managers in the UK who do look after my pension जो वहाँ पे पड़ा हुआ है. So 3 चीजें दुनिया भर में बहुत useful रहती है when you're choosing a fund manager. पहला, what percentage of his wealth is invested in that fund? In my case, the entire savings, my parents' retirement savings, our entire corpus, my colleagues' पूरा का पूरा Marcellus का जो founder group है, हमारे सारे savings, हमारे माँ बाप के savings Marcellus में है. One of the reasons for that is we simply haven't been able to find, as I was saying, mutual funds which are satisfactory in managing our wealth. हम मेहनत करते हैं, हम दूसरे लोगों को पैसा नहीं देंगे, जो जाके निवेश करेंगे मेरे को पता है वो कहाँ पे निवेश कर रहे हैं, और वो लोग पैसा that promoter steals my money. So the first thing you should look for is ask the fund manager what percentage of your wealth, Mr. Fund Manager, is invested in the fund. In our case, it's 100%. Secondly, ask the fund manager what are the costs. The higher the expense ratio, जितना ज़्यादा खर्चा उतनी कम आपकी compounding. In our case, we have 0 fixed fees. There is no entry load, there is no exit load. Up to 8% returns, we charge you 0. कुछ नहीं लेते 8% रिटर्न तक. 8 के ऊपर जो excess बनता है, 8 के ऊपर जो excess बनता है, we take 1/5 of that excess on your anniversary date with us. Right? So second thing which is important for you is check with the fund manager आपकी expense ratio कितनी है. Typical mutual fund में expense ratio 2% आता है. That means that much less chance that you guys will make money. The mutual fund obviously will make money because 2% की expense ratio हासिल हो रही है उसको. And the third thing to look for is the length of time the portfolio has been compounding. In our case, it's been compounding for the best part of 4 years, right? There are other funds which have compounded longer, but in our case, it's been compounding for 4 years. Over that time period, the compounding has been 25%. Over the same time period, the market has compounded at 17%. 17% market ने दिया है. If you have had a broad-based mutual fund portfolio over that period, over the 4 years, you would have also compounded at 17%, which is not a bad number, to be fair. Right. But as Rajat ji was saying, if you want to get a better outcome, then obviously you'll have to have a fund manager. Otherwise, you get the broad-based market outcome.
Great. Thanks, Saurabh. And this was actually the thing, the compounding part that you have put. And we have actually seen that. Even diversified funds in which one sector actually outshines the other. Many of the companies, allocations are across 100 companies, so on and so forth. And as we know that Marcellus as a PMS, they don't churn the portfolio too much. Remain steady, and then maybe on and off once a year or a 2 year, you make an update into it without much of the churning.
बिल्कुल खरीदा बेची से क्लाइंट का लॉस होता है. एवरी टाइम एनी फंड मैनेजर बाइज एंड सेल्स, you as the client end up incurring brokerage, you incur capital gains tax. Now Rajat was right there. आपको पता नहीं चलता म्यूचुअल फंड कितना चर्न कर रहा है, राइट? बिकॉज आपको दिखता नहीं है. हमारे केस में every time we churn, you will get to know. We also have a responsibility to intimate you. We churn very little, which means फालतू में आपका पैसा ब्रोकर को रिच नहीं बनाता.
Exactly. Thank you, Saurabh. And if anyone, you all are free to ask if anyone have queries. So before we wind up, we can have a query, anyone. Okay.
Hi,
yeah.
I have a question.
Please go ahead.
Thanks, Saurabh, for such an enlightening session. But one statement which was most striking was when you started saying that Indian stock market is a sham. So I was a bit taken aback.
So देखिए ना, so I'll give you a simple way. So we're trying our best, right? We work as I said, I sit on several regulatory committees. भारत सरकार के साथ भी काम किया है हमने. So one of the things that government has done is created the NFRA, which is a regulatory committee sitting in Delhi. A regulatory body, regulatory body to regulate the auditors. A lot of the panga is in the auditor community. So I'll give you a simple way. Our country gives you a raw deal. So दुनिया में कोई भी बड़ा स्टॉक मार्केट देखिए, कंट्री का नॉमिनल जीडीपी रेट नॉमिनल जीडीपी ग्रोथ से स्टॉक मार्केट बेटर रिटर्न देता है. Why? Because the stock market represents the best of that country. So if the country is growing, for example, at 10% nominal, the stock market will give better than 10 because there's a survivorship bias, right? So for example, if you look at the US economy nominal terms पे मतलब GDP growth plus inflation, US economy last 10 साल में grow की है 6%. S&P 500 has given 15%, right? 9% extra. हमारे देश का nominal GDP growth है 11-12% आराम से, right? There are long periods in India's history where the market gives 10. In fact, even if you take from 1979 to today, market ने 12-13 ही दिया है, which is same as nominal GDP. That immediately means that पैसा चोरी हो रहा है. That immediately means paisa chori ho raha hai, right? That's the first way to assess that. The fact that the Indian stock market does not give significantly more than GDP growth immediately means chori kiya ja raha hai paisa. Because otherwise, the stock market should represent the best the country has to offer, no? So the country is growing at 12, तो अनुराग जी को 14-15 तो कम से कम मिलना चाहिए. वो कहाँ है पैसा? So first thing, right? Second thing is return on capital. As I said, the typical Nifty company's return on capital is 11-12%. वो भी मैं generous हो रहा हूँ actually. 11-12%. That doesn't make any sense. Why should giant companies who dominate steel and airlines and telecom and banking, why should they make 11-12%? Right? Which means पीछे naughty चीजें हो रही हैं. Right? Another way to understand this is, remember cash flow. In simple terms, cash flow is return on capital minus cost of capital.
Yeah.
Because your return on capital is 11-12 and because cost of capital is roughly 14-15, the bulk of the Nifty doesn't generate any free cash flow in the last 1, 3, 5, 10, 15 years, right? And we are talking about giant companies, where, as I said, the promoters living it up, right? IPL auction में तो promoter बहुत कूद रहे हैं, but annual report में तो पैसे नहीं है. तो पैसे कहाँ पे आए IPL auction के? Right? And you know the sums that were, IPL में कितना खर्चा गया, क्या आपने देखा? So there's a variety of ways to attack the issue. One, and the final way, obviously, is you read the annual reports. And because we are forensic accountants, we see the naughtiness. And it's farcical in many cases because we've done this for so many years. The promoter and we know each other on first name terms. As I said, in many cases, they've told us ऐसे करते हैं. Now, they have their excuses. Their point, Anurag ji, is, देखो सौरभ हम मजबूर हैं, हमको ये नेता, वो civil servant. So for example, if you set up a hotel in Mumbai, you need 60 clearances. And you can imagine every clearance has chocolates associated with it.
Yeah.
So he's not going to go and sell his wife's jewelry to pay for the clearance. No, he's going to steal from the company.
Right.
And if you are investing in that hotel company, then he's stealing from you effectively. But his point is, मैं क्या करूं? मैं कहां से वो clearances के पैसे भरूं? If you run a mine in India, you need some like 200 clearances to run a mine. आप कैसे चलाओगे without stealing money?
Understood. And a follow-up question from this is that all mutual funds with a large cap, mid cap, so do you look at them as that?
So if
you should not invest.
If you want to do mutual funds, look for focused funds, right?
Okay.
इसमें 20-25 स्टॉक हो. 25 स्टॉक से ज्यादा equity mutual fund लेना बहुत खतरनाक है. So look for focused funds. There are some decent focused funds. I'm sure Mr. Dhar will tell you about them. Focused funds खोजिए. इंडिया में कुछ अच्छे focused funds है. In my book Coffee Can Investing, so 2018 की जो मेरी उस साल की bestseller थी, उसका नाम है Coffee Can Investing. I've given you a framework with which you can identify good mutual funds. But the typical mutual fund large cap जिसके पास 50-60 stock है, you might as well take 1/3 of your money, throw it out of your window right now.
Understood. Okay.
And 1/3, I'm again being kind. 1/3 में kindly बोल रहा हूँ, right? So it's as crazy as that, right? That's why you need to take care, right? I think what Rajat is saying is very valid. You guys are working hard for your money. Think carefully, take care. Don't just believe कि जैसे ये branded institution है, मेरे पैसे समझ जाएंगे. आप लोगों को पता है मार्च 2020 में क्या हुआ, राइट? एक मशहूर विदेशी म्यूचुअल फंड ने क्या किया. उस मशहूर विदेशी म्यूचुअल फंड को मैंने 3 साल पहले बोला था तुम्हारा फटेगा. You guys are doing the wrong thing. They धमकाउड me. I went to the regulator, I went to the central bank. जहाँ पे मैं जा सका था मैंने कोशिश की कि इनको रोका जाए. But you can understand how the system works. So just like even though we live in apartment blocks and gated complexes, we have 5 security guards in the building, right? मेरे बिल्डिंग में 2 गेट पे हैं. बॉम्बे इज रिलेटिवली सेफ, फिर भी 2 सिक्योरिटी गार्ड गेट पे हैं, 2 बेसमेंट पे हैं, 2 लॉबी में हैं, 6 सिक्योरिटी गार्ड्स हैं, right? Why do we have that? We trust that the police will help us, but we also want 6 security guards in our building to keep ourselves, our friends, our families, our kids safe. So think of your investments like that. Be very vigilant. You guys are in a way. See, what is the tragedy of India? The people living in the slums, they're not going to be targeted. वो बेचारे गरीब हैं. And the billionaires are not going to be targeted. They're very powerful. You and I are the soft targets. Yeah. We're rich enough to be worthwhile fleecing us, but we're not so rich that we can fight back. So be very, very careful because you're in the target zone for some of the cleverest people in the country.
Thanks, Saurabh. It was indeed.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. And it was really an incredible session. And I would like to tell you that this is one of the initial sessions of private investors meet that we have conducted. And you have been our flagship first round of speakers. उससे पहले हम seminars करते थे. तो इस बार हमने ये सोचा कि ज्ञानबाजी हम कम करें, but rather than have a closed investor meet where people themselves interact with you and the people like you who are actually the thought leaders and ones who have been doing and performing into the market. Thank you, and thanks Apoor and Parthiv, and I will like to thank each one of you. So Apoor and Parthiv, off to you if you want to give some signing remarks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rajat. Thank you so much, Saurabh. It was a very insightful session, Saurabh. Thank you for your time. I hope, Rajat, your investors have got brief insights and they have got stock picking from none other than Mr. Saurabh Mukherjea. Thank you so much.
Yes, it has been a credible interactive session, and we will also ensure that whatever the pearls of wisdom Saurabh has shared with us, we extract that and also communicate further down to those investors who were unable to connect, so that a proper engagement remains there. And thanks a ton, Saurabh, for taking time at this time. We understand how much tough schedule you are having, and we very appreciate you that you were able to take out time and come to us at such a short notice.
Thank you, Rajat. Take care. Thank you for organizing this. Thank you. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.